Be back to eat. Is your watch on? Time I was in there.
3:59 it says.
I'm glad we're on the same time.
Yes, yes.
I know, I was tired of getting all the grief from everybody about being ahead of time.
4 o'clock.
Just turned to 4 o'clock. Okay, it is 4 o'clock. We're going to go ahead and get started. So welcome, Pastor West.
Lord, I thank you so much for our community, and I thank you so much for this hospital district, Father, who strive to make our community better and who also strive to preserve people's lives, including the life of my son. And so, Lord, I pray that you would give them guidance today. I recognize that heavy is the head that wears the crown, but the one thing that I am absolutely convinced of is that they will make the decisions that are right for our community. Father, I pray that you would guide them and lead them. In the name of the great physician, Jesus, I pray. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Oh, Carrie.
Pledge allegiance to the
Of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
followed you.
Yeah, apparently my form.
There you go. All right, can I hear a motion for the approval of the chairman's meeting minutes dated January 17th, the regular monthly meeting minutes dated January 18th, and a February disbursement of
$1,312,103.05.
So moved. Second?
all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. I was reminded that when we speak, if you could speak into your microphones, because apparently when people go back to view the film and that, they can't hear people when we're sitting back and talking. So if you could please remember to do that. Okay, we'll move on then. District Council.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. It's been another busy month with the district. We have a few things that we're working on right now. They're kind of big projects. Throughout the month, of course, we've responded to questions from trustees as they've arisen pertaining to various matters the district's handling. We do continue to review the annual deadlines and deliverables due to the district under the lease with Indian River Cleveland Clinic and have responded to questions as they arise. We did recently send them some information about some deliverables that are due, and actually got a call from their council yesterday asking about that. So I explained to them that that's really just kind of a routine thing that we do with regard to the deliverables due under the lease, and they now understand that they're gonna confirm that the client will send us what we need, and we'll look at it, and if anything else needs to happen, we'll communicate that. So just kind of a routine process that we follow. As you're all aware, the district's entered into a sale agreement regarding the hospice house parcel for fair market value price of $3.8 million between the district and the Visiting Nurse Association, and that is still on track to close in early April of this year. We'll keep you updated as we progress towards closing, but as of today's date, I don't have any further updates on that. Also, as we've been discussing, the human service building that the district owns is currently vacant, and we've been in discussions with the Edward Via College of Osteopathic Medicine, which is interested in leasing the building for use as a future medical school. So we're continuing on the process of working to finalize some terms of a lease agreement between the parties that would be palatable and workable, and we will be bringing that before the board for approval when the lease draft is in place. That's still kind of an ongoing project. We're also monitoring several different Florida House bills, which, if they pass, would impact the hospital improvement district in two main ways: term limits of 12 consecutive years, as well as a referendum being required on November 3rd of 2026. I think there was some movement on this. Yeah,
Believe
I
that's
think
been
this was drafted before that was dropped. So strike what I just said. We are continuing to track it, but there's been a change since this report was drafted. I don't believe it will be put before a referendum for vote any longer. That piece was removed, but the term limit piece did stay on, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so we're continuing to track that bill as it relates to the district and the trustees and term limits that they would be able to follow.
What is the hospital improvement district?
I think that's supposed to say the hospital district.
Okay,
Not sure where that came from. But we aren't an improvement district. We are the Indian River County Hospital District.
Okay. I just thought maybe we changed our name.
Nothing changed. Some little typo there.
Okay.
Also, we are monitoring the Florida Association of Special Districts for further information and details with regard to compliance options that become available for the trustees. Regarding ethics training, Kate did also just provide an update on this yesterday at our chairman's meeting. So again, when I submitted this a week plus ago, that had not come out. She's in the process of working through those details for you guys so you can sign up for those and figure out how we're gonna do that logistically, individually, on a case-by-case basis. As I mentioned yesterday, we've also ordered an appraisal for the 2 properties owned by Children's Home Society that we're interested in exploring for a future possible detox and sober living facility. And so that is in process. We did vote yesterday to appoint Karen as our trustee individual to work with Frank and I, and then bring back recommendations to the full board. So we'll be getting with you, Karen, to kind of set up a meeting to talk more about that. We're still also working on the district's bylaws, just kind of a housekeeping item there to review them for changes, and I do expect to bring those before you for approval at the March chairman's meeting. There really haven't been any substantive changes that we found, really just some housekeeping items that we cleaned up. Questions that anybody has for me?
Did we give approval to go ahead then with an appraisal on those properties?
You did, and it's been ordered. We're using Boyle and Drake.
Right.
And so we're just waiting for the details to come back on that, and then we'll be working,
That's starting place.
yes, as a starting place. And we'll be working through Karen with that, and then bringing a recommendation before the board.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on, Michael, Treasurer Financial Report.
Okay, 4 months into the fiscal year, I'm pleased to report, as usual, that the hospital district continues to be in very sound financial condition. As evidenced in the report that you received in the packet, the district has now received 85% of our budgeted tax revenue. On the expense side, it also shows program expenses are $209,104 under budget for January and $679,704 under budget year-to-date. Administrative expenses in January were over budget by approximately $41,000 and over budget by approximately $86,000 for the year. As reported in the handout, the monthly overage in January is largely due to audit fees, legal fees, and then consultant fees, particularly pertaining to the performance audit. For the overview of the district's investments, I'd ask you to please turn to that one-page summary prepared by Mr. Isley, which is the final page on the financial statement. You are welcome to inquire about any of the pages in between, but I think this does a very effective job when it comes in particular to an overview and an analysis of our investments. In section 1 there, you'll see that there's a list of the 7 UST bills valued at $9,200,534. And you'll note the maturity rates off on the right are laddered. They come due monthly through October of 2024. Section 2 shows the district's holdings in the preferred deposit fund. That's a money market account that totals $7,616,737. Section 3 then details the balances at the end of January of our Seacoast deposit and operating accounts. Those two total $451,417. And adding the Seacoast cash accounts, the district's investment and cash totals are $17,268,688. That is, of course, the vast majority being those investment funds. The investments total $16,817,271. There's a kind of an internal, there's not a policy that anybody's established, but Frank's doing his best, and I think his kind of internal goal is to see if we can't keep about 95% of the dollars that we do have that are unnecessary for immediate needs to be in investments. And we're doing well in that regard. We talked actually last month in more detail about the investment income. Last thing I'd like to report on is earlier this week, Tuesday, the Finance and Audit Committee met. At that meeting, Mr. Kip Jacoby, who is the district's auditor, walked the committee through the completed financial statements for last fiscal year. Mr. Jacoby will be presenting that final audit report to the trustees at next month's meeting, and I'll foreshadow for you that I think you will all be very pleased with the audit report. And additionally, the committee had asked since he was coming, and we had wanted some input from him, we had asked him to please review the draft of our accounting and financial practices and procedures manual, which we've been working diligently on, and to provide feedback on the content. Thankfully, Kip did his homework and came back, and we spent some time going through the draft document, and he provided us some very important and very appreciated suggestions, as well as three or four things that he thought should be included that aren't there. So it was a good session regarding that stage of the creation of that document. We are close to completing that document. We hope to be able to present it to the trustees for their review and approval, hopefully at next month's meeting, but I would think certainly not any longer than 2 months hence. And unless there are specific questions, which I'd be happy to try to answer, that concludes my report.
So I do have some questions. Overall program expenses under budget.
Yeah.
Year-to-date, $679,000. If you extrapolate that out, I mean, you're well over $1 million, $1.5 million almost. And that has to be only those places where we do pay for service, because the others are every month, right? So I'd like to understand, I mean, are we that much under what volume?
Yeah, what I'm going to do, and there's also some timing
That's a
issues.
large,
So I'm going to I'll ask Kate to speak to that, if you could, please.
Oh, okay, yeah, sure.
can you speak into the microphone, Kate?
Let me turn the microphone on. Okay, can you hear me? Yes, okay. So some of our agencies are paid on a quarterly basis, and we've only had 1 quarter of those expenses happen. So there's probably a little lag in an overall budget picture that would put us under budget, but volumes seem to be relatively stable. So we also, are funding Right Life, so there's a difference from that as well, because a total budget was approved and then it's averaged out, and so those funds aren't being expensed.
So we do a straight line budget,
Yeah.
and we don't do an adjusted budget based on what we know is paid quarterly? Okay.
I don't believe so.
Correct. I don't want to, and let's not assume just because we have that positive variance now that those dollars won't be expended, and we will get those invoices. The timing is just not what we might expect, correct? Because the way we have the budget set up, which, perhaps we could do that differently in future years.
Well, I just, for anybody looking out, it looks a little odd to say, geez,
Indeed.
we're that
Yeah.
far
Agreed.
under,
Agreed.
under budget. And if we know that people are paid quarterly, then we should have a timed budget. versus
Correct.
a straight line.
Indeed, indeed.
And I think that when we do the budget this year and showing it to us, show us who is on monthly, quarterly. And there is a situation also when a new program starts, the funding's not available until October 1st. So then there's a ramp up time, so there may be a time in the first quarter, whereas they're not going to be using as many funds if it's on a fee-for-service base, individual service. So it would take, a little longer to get it going, so we would probably see that lag as well.
Let me just add to that, Madam Chairman. I think once we will get this dialed in, I think finance and audit is a great vehicle for that. I think there's been a lot we've learned from just having that committee. Even from a revenue perspective, it's the same thing. Is we have a extremely positive variance for the first few months. Then we have an extremely negative variance for the rest of the year because our funds come in, these tax dollars come in, and they're heavily weighted for the first few months of the year. So we need to clean that up and just make it a little bit clearer. So I think finance and audit, we're having these discussions, so.
And I should have done the comparison, or might have, but I didn't. It struck me as a large number too, but I also know that at this point last year, we were in not a dissimilar position. I think it is larger this year. I'm going to suggest that maybe for next month's meeting, I'll prepare a separate sheet, which is just going to do an analysis, agency by agency, of where they're at our 5-month report. And it's not always the best analysis to go back and look, but what I'll do, I'll put a column in there for how they were tracking the year before. It's just, every year's different, things change, but because of the particular amount of money is significant, I'll make sure that we are prepared to speak to it, and I'll prepare that. And could maybe even have for the chairman's meeting if we wanted to get into it by next time around.
It just struck me
No,
as very large. number.
absolutely, it is.
I had two questions, Michael or Frank. Just for my knowledge, what are commissions and related to? What is the big number?
What was the question, Doctor?
What are commissions?
Oh, committee?
Commissions,
Well, we have to pay fees to the county for the property appraiser and for who's the other body? The tax collector and, yeah. And the appraiser. They pull commissions out of the amount of money that we know that we're going to get. And we've budgeted both the gross amount as well as the expenditures for those commissions were in our budget.
Which run us about $850,000 a year,
yeah,
based on our current,
okay.
revenue tax.
Second was the 86,000 over budget. Is that related to what you spoke earlier? It's timing related to happens in the fiscal?
Right, and again, I think a fair amount of it was maybe the performance audit. There was also, and I didn't list it here, but I think in the cover sheet that was prepared, it also refers to, there was some expense for HR review that was done by a
Correct.
local firm.
Right, from my understanding and from what I understand that we did last year from an administrative expense perspective, we have many more things happening this year, which were a few of them unplanned, which are we're requiring to spend a little bit more for administrative fees than we typically would. This will not be an every year thing.
Okay, well, it's about 23,000 per month over, and I thought, well, was there one thing that affected it, or more than one, or is it just timing?
It's all of it combined.
Yeah, we were over last month too, I remember reporting, and I think it was just, a lot of it was legal services because we were very involved in the transactions of winding down the VNA and ramping up with. Yeah, there were a lot of legal, I'm not throwing stones, Jen. It literally was a matter of, there are things that we hadn't budgeted for or planned for at that point in time.
There's several more too that we haven't mentioned though. Gifford Health Center had some expenses that were one-time things. I mean, Kate, can you speak to it, please?
Sure. Just briefly, I did an analysis of what we've been spending for the Gifford Health Center and the HSB, and year-to-date, we've spent $70,000 on those two properties. So there have been some things finishing up with the new generator that were paid out, as well as, the issues with the HSB initially, the monthly expenses with the HSB, and then the other things that happened at Gifford that were unplanned. So that's significant.
Significant.
And there were expenses related to the human services bill.
Correct, yes.
Right.
We had two
Right.
small floods and lots of air conditioning, property management fees now. So, as we're truly property owners and we're seeing some expense with
And
that.
some of these things were budgeted for, there was an anticipated expense. They just happened early in the year, so that's also going to, as we get into the year, even itself out.
Indeed.
But there have been additional expenses.
Okay, any other questions for Michael? Okay, Executive Director report, Frank.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'm just going to mention a couple things and be brief. We covered a lot of ground yesterday. The Independent Special Hospital District Performance Review is currently in process. We received that on January 30th. We're doing an internal review. We're getting some clarifications. That will be shared with the trustees with a summary letter and recommendations. Interestingly enough, a lot of the recommendations that we're reading that are in the review with the consultant that we hired are things that we currently are doing. We're arranging, we have in place. So the recommendations just work, are consistent with some of the things we've already done in establishing the Finance and Audit Committee and several things related to putting certain controls in place that we're already doing. So that's working out well. The second thing I just wanted to mention is specific to, I won't get into strategic planning because that's a February thing, but speaking to January, I had a chance to just observe some of the national trends and thinking about how we can apply some of the changes in practice, changes in healthcare delivery models that are happening nationally as it relates to acute care at home, which Cleveland Clinic and Indian River Hospital is already doing, and several other things related to technology that will help us for the future and have a better understanding of how we can truly make a difference in the health and well-being of folks in every corner of our county through technology, through mobile, through virtual, through acute care at home, and several other things that I think will have a big impact on our community. So I'm going to stop there, see if there's any questions about anything from the group. Thank you.
Okay, hearing none, we will go to our agency reports. So, Renee?
Good afternoon, and thanks for having us. I'm Ellen Wayne. I'm the CEO of Catholic Charities. We're the oversight organization for the Samaritan Center. With me is Renee Beerley, who is our development director at our Samaritan Center, and also Jithan George, who is our clinical director of our counseling services, integral to the funding that we receive from the district and a key component of our Samaritan Center program. So we thank you for the funding that you've provided to our organization and the opportunity to enhance our services through on-site counseling as opposed to retained subcontracted services. I know you've received the report, so if you're all right, I'll just go right into the questions that you've posed.
That'd be great.
Great.
Thank you.
So the first question was tied to the learnings that our team had during this particular funding period. And while counseling services have been embedded in our program since its inception, what we found when we brought the program on site and used our own team is that that there's a greater significance to the stigma attached to mental health in certain populations than we might have anticipated. We've always engaged our residents, both at the pre-screening, the admission, and during their stay with mental health services, and it was never really optional, so we didn't necessarily pay attention to that stigma that some might carry with regards to receiving assistance. And putting the counselor directly within the residents and developing that comfort level helps kind of unfold some of that with us. And particularly with regards to some of our populations that we're serving, whether it's cultural, whether it's an avoidance because that wasn't talked about in their family or in their broader community. What we're seeing and appreciating as a result of being able to place that counselor there is the gradual increase in trust and destigmatizing of the receipt of mental health services. So we appreciate that opportunity and the impact that it's having on the residents we're serving. That day-to-day ability to interact and to see it as a normalized activity, seeking help and seeking intervention, that's pretty significant. So we appreciate that learning. The second thing that I would want to point out, and it's a little bit less tied to the direct client relationship and more about our organization as a whole. So for the better part of 30 years, we subcontracted this service out. Again, it was always a part of our programming, but never internal. And meanwhile, we had a thriving professional and quality counseling program that we offered to the general public, and are certified by insurance agencies and everything. So we didn't necessarily trust ourselves as being the appropriate provider of first choice for our own clients. And it really did help us change the narrative within our organization, and I'm seeing more and more the potential for our residents of Samaritan Center to utilize other programs and services, including our Birthline support programs. And I think as an administrator of an organization, that's the best thing you could hope for. We should be our own provider of choice. Again, not disparaging the providers that we had. They were fantastic. But I think the bringing it in-house model worked a little bit better for us. With regards to the second question in terms of what did work or didn't necessarily work as anticipated, the reason we recognize the need, do you want to handle this, Jithan? Yeah, come on up. Go ahead.
I can quickly talk for that. One thing that we did not plan, or we planned was to have after-hour crisis, and our counselor was available for after-hour crisis, but we did not need it. This past reporting months, we did not have any incident that required after-hour crisis, but we continue to have our counselor available for after-hour crisis. The second part was, as Ellen was saying, we've been providing counseling in the community, but this is the first time we are actually hiring a counselor to be in-house, where they are interacting constantly with the clients, with the residents in the house. And so we saw there is a big need of building rapport with the clients. And so this counselor is learning to engage the clients more in a way that they are more open to receiving counseling and making change in their life. So thank you.
Can I ask a question? I mean, the counseling, is it primarily for the parents, or are you seeing that the children have that great need as well?
Yeah, absolutely, for children as well, depending on the age of the children. So we do ask the children also to receive counseling. It just depends. We even had, in the report, I believe we mentioned about one incident where one of the resident child who was arrested, and he was immediately able to receive counseling because our counselor was in-house.
Question two. First of all, I appreciate the great work Samaritan Center and Catholic Charities does. Last time you were here, you were asking, I thought it was for an intake manager or something related, and I can't remember exactly what the point was, but you asked for extra funds. Did that happen? Did you hire a intake manager here?
At Samaritan Center, this request has been specific for the counseling, the in-house counselor. They are part of our intake team in terms of doing an assessment, but to my knowledge, I don't recall that we'd ever formally requested that. And I apologize if I'm misspeaking.
We gave you some funding last fiscal year.
But it was for this, it was for this counseling position, right? Yes. The third question that you posed, I appreciated because it relates to emerging trends in healthcare. And one or two elements that I might mention really quickly aren't coming as a surprise to me, and I appreciate them. The first is the increasing emphasis on housing as being a critical component of healthcare. So we know in the federal level at the Medicaid plans are going to be allowed to recognize housing as a legitimate Medicaid expense. We've long since known and understood housing to be a social determinant of health, and I think putting that seal on it at the federal level is pretty significant. Now, granted, that's up to the states to determine what their actual Medicaid platform and plans are. But I think it takes us a long way in terms of recognizing the critical nature of housing in terms of addressing the overall health needs. And I can appreciate that as a hospital district, that might be something that would be interesting to you as well. The significant concern, and I think many people share it, the increased demand for services and the declining population of providers. We're constantly working with our families to change their mode of operation from crisis and reactive to preventative and with some advanced forethought. And so maintaining a relationship with a primary care provider or proactive and preventative health care is a key component of that. So it would be concerning for us if we position our clients, our residents, to behave or engage in that manner and only to be met with a reduction in terms of the availability of providers, or to call in, be told, yes, we can get you in July 1st, because that doesn't necessarily meet what we're hoping that they do in terms of maintaining their own particular care, et cetera. And the third one may or may not jive with, Frank, what you're mentioning in trends, but I think artificial intelligence is an emerging trend that we do need to be attentive to. course, we're coming at it from a soft skills perspective, and I will admit to you, we as an organization do utilize AI in some of our programs in terms of that initial engagement. And I can certainly understand and appreciate how it has the potential for reduction of human error, et cetera, when reading scans or processing flow of information, et cetera. But gosh, what I would hate to have happen is in that most intimate relationship that you need to have with your healthcare provider, that some of that personal contact. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. And again, just you asked the question, so I figured it would be interesting to get that in there. And I can see how it's an advantage. And as I mentioned, we are using it a little, but boy, it makes me kind of catch my breath too. Any questions?
There's a lot of ethical issues related to artificial intelligence.
Absolutely.
And how it's going to be carried out, particularly in healthcare. So there's a lot to learn for that.
Sure, thank you.
Yeah, I had questions. What, just for education, what is level 3 or higher and your success measuring of transitional housing? What is level 3? What
Renee?
levels are you referring to?
In terms of the stability of the families, so.
What does it mean, level 1,
Oh,
2,
sure.
3, or
Do you
4?
want to?
So we have a 4-step level system. So when they come in the first month, we want to make sure that they have all the necessary paperwork and their immunizations, and they've gone through the background checks and the drug screens and everything. We want to just get the family stabilized. We want them to take a breath and go, okay, we're here now. We're in a safe, nurturing environment. And then we want to work on, if they do not have employment, then we want to make sure that they get employment. And we utilize a lot of organizational lifts within our community, such as United Against Poverty, that has a fantastic step-up program. And so that's level 1. Then level 2 and 3 is just maintaining, obtaining the employment and maintaining employment. They open a savings account and they begin to save 75% of their income. On level 4, we're working with them on a transition plan to their permanent housing solution. And I feel like, we had 66% successful in the last reporting period, but I do know that in the next month, and I know one of our clients moved out today successfully, so that's a very good day, and we have 3 other families that are planning to transition also successfully out of the center.
And one other question, I'm familiar with what you do and how hard it is and the people you deal with and their families, but I was a little surprised when you had your average intake score of 2.5 ASSM that 3 months after discharge was only slightly better, fractionally better. Why is that? You would think you'd at least be a little bit better after spending 3 or 4 or 5 months with you, or is the nature of the people we're dealing with?
I think we're probably going to continue to see improvement there on that Arizona self-sufficiency matrix. I think we want to consider maybe, we were doing them like at 3-month intervals. I think maybe we might need to break that back down a little bit more to really show those increases there.
And I think it's important to note, our post-residence support also allows that to improve and continue improving even after people are permanently or stably housed outside of our particular domiciles. So it isn't something that's their fixed score and that's where they remain for, the rest of the time. We're constantly nurturing and encouraging gradual improvements on that. Mm-hmm. But when we're looking at folks with systemic and generational issues of chaos and crisis, even a small incremental move is significant for many of them.
That was one of the questions I was going to ask, because I looked at, what do you call the WHODAS? HUDAS?
HUDAS, correct.
And I guessed it, and Arizona self-sufficiency. There was improvement in both of the numbers, but as I'm on a 1 to 5 scale, they seem kind of nominal, and I didn't know, is that the norm? If that is, and you're still getting, a 90% success rate for those that get your level 3, I just kind of thought that maybe that would have bumped higher, but I don't know the tests, the measurement tools at all.
Jithan, do you want to speak specifically to HUDAS?
Sure. So HUDA's calculates or assesses on 7 different factors, 7 different areas. And so those slight changes, it is still minimal, but it does is
And
is
that's what Ellen
significant.
said. I mean,
Right, yeah.
I accept that. I just,
Yeah.
on a 5-point scale,
Right.
the bump didn't seem that significant to me, so I at least wanted to ask the question.
And this one is also done every 3 months, so it is probably still in working, as the client continues to work. So it's probably just a difference of about 3 months, how much of that changes.
I think that might be, actually specifically with regards to the HUDAS, that might be something important to pay attention to as emerging trends, because oftentimes some of our funding source allows, not this particular one, but some of our other counseling funding allows for a minimal number of visits, or maximum rather, so at 12. So really, what type of improvement can we hope for when we're talking about changing an entire lifestyle or system of concerns that families present with? So, that is something to pay attention to in terms of the long-term engagement. We are a short-term program, but what would happen if these families received 3 years' worth of intensive supports, even after they were in, a permanent address or a little bit further away from us, et cetera? And I wonder what that shift might look like at that point.
I just do want to add that I spent a couple hours at their facility, toured, met all their staff, learned about their model, met some of the residents, was very impressed. They do a fantastic job from what I observed in my time there. I think they have a lot of potential to do a lot more good.
Thank you.
A lot more good.
I know what you mean.
So,
Yeah, thank you.
What is your wait list?
We have about 6 families on our wait list right now.
Okay.
We have a very long phone log, though, of individuals and families that have called in, but they're on the wait list. Then they're just waiting for a room to be available fit the size of their family.
And that's actually another improvement that we recognized and implemented this year. Our prior model, once an individual moved out, we would begin the intake and assessment process for the next family. We've bumped that up, so some of that is taking place even in advance of a room being available, so that there is a little bit less downtime or lag time between vacancy and the next family coming in.
How many rooms do you have?
It's a total of 9 rooms. Some of them are adjoining rooms, so if it's a larger family, one family may take up 2 rooms. So that actually ebbs and flows the total number of families we can have at any one time.
And it is families?
It is
that you
families.
take? You
Yes,
don't
parents
take
with children.
Individual
No,
persons?
correct, correct.
I had a couple of questions relative to the families you're reporting on here, which is just 16 over this 6-month period. And I know it's not necessarily indicative of, in my other life, we were funding at United Way Samaritan Center since the get-go, and I've been in there many times. But 2 things crossed my mind as I was looking at your report on the families, these 16 families. One was, how many of these families are 2-parent families? And I'm going to ask specific to this 16 and your sense of, you've got a history. What-
In
how many are
this
single
last
family?
6 months, they were all single parents.
And that's not surprising, but I didn't also want to just make that assumption. That's
Right.
one of the reasons I'm asking. You do take 2?
Yes,
2
yes,
parents?
and we've had, but that's not the
not the
norm. I
norm.
would say that
Okay.
probably around about 90% of them are single-parent
Okay.
families. And in the last year and a half, we actually even had a grandmother who had custody of her
Sure.
child.
Okay. That's kind of what I thought, but I wanted to ask. The other actually was the breakdown of these 16 families in terms of their race and ethnicity. I mean, I've been in there many times, and I think I know who the population is. That's ridiculous when I visit once a year, every now and then. But the percentage breakouts were 69% Black, 12% white, 12% Hispanic. And that surprised me a little because you've always had a blend of nationalities, backgrounds, race, ethnicity. But I don't, in this instance, I don't remember seeing that many
In this
African-American
particular,
families.
yeah, in this particular incidence, the demographic is showing a greater majority of
And that's what
African-American
surprised me.
single-parent families.
And this is a little out of the norm, I'm taking it?
Yes, you are correct.
Okay. I thought that too, but wanted to ask the question.
You're absolutely correct.
And let me ask you one question about housing. Do you have somebody that just works on trying to find housing for these folks, or how do you go about doing that?
We work with Treasure Coast Homeless Services Council pretty closely, and these 4 families that are transitioning out, they are actually assisting all of these families. We also just kind of pound the pavement like anybody else, and then we also have some connections within the community that we know that we can give a call and say, hey, do you have a property available, or do you foresee one in the near future? Our staff has been known to get around and drive around in their car and call the numbers. You know, we pretty much do anything we can to help these families, because it's extremely difficult, as you know.
Yeah, that is one of those community trends that is just, it's impacting us, it's impacting, you know, our community partners, and it's impacting folks who are unfortunately on the way to landing on our radar because they're being priced out of their current rental circumstances.
I appreciate that. Well, thank you. Any other questions?
Thank you. Once again, we're very grateful. We're very grateful. Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Keep doing the good work you do.
Thank you very much.
That's good. Okay, the other 2, Hope for Families and Tykes for Teens, if anybody had any questions about what they were, just let Kate know, and we can follow up with that. Any unfinished business from trustees? No? New business? Paul?
Sure. Apologize for being late. I couldn't speak when I was on the phone, but I voted. The only time we did vote was the consent agenda, and I voted in favor.
Oh, thank you.
But can't say I was obeying the speed limit to get here, but I was on my way here. I had an appointment run late, and I apologize for that. So I put this on the agenda item because in December we had a conversation concurrent with the discussion about, I think to some degree, buying the real estate for the detox. And my point was, we have an asset that might help us offset the cost of that property when it comes time to purchase it. Let's explore saving the taxpayers some money by selling it, and the decision was unanimous to explore that. Following that meeting, Robert Sedlecki sent a letter or an email just indicating that he had attached a letter that we'd received back in March of last year, because I think the conversation took place back then too, also in reference to detox. You had presented, Mary Beth, the possibility, I think there was a property on 37th that just, we did nothing formal, nothing, but it just opened up the door for the conversation. So in response to that, Cleveland Clinic had sent Jennifer Peschke a letter just saying that at some time in the future they hope to be able to use that property, and I think they may have had a conversation with you that they weren't no specific plans, but they do intend to use it at some point. My concern was the email that we received from Robert might be misinterpreted, because it seemed to be that they had the right to make it available or not. And my read of the lease was different, and that's why I provided the memo, which was we actually retain the right to sell it. They retain a right to for first refusal to outbid whatever or meet the proposal from that potential purchaser. And my concern was that the email may have, in the minds of the trustees, ended the discussion or the consideration in some way. I've done a little bit of exploring, and in terms of the value to the taxpayers, could be anywhere from $4 to $6 million, and that's not an expert opinion by any stretch. I've consulted with a few realtors that are highly regarded. I'm not going to name them. I contacted the property appraiser's office today. It's currently appraised or assessed at $1.7 million. There are actually we have 2 properties there. There's a 45-acre piece and a 5-acre piece, as I understand it. The property appraiser's office has a function that you can put in the value of the property, and it'll tell you what, given its address, what it's going to generate in property taxes. I mention that because as long as we own it, it's not contributing to our tax base, which is another reason why we might want to consider the benefit to the taxpayers. If it's sold, it's obviously that assessment's going to change, and it could put the tax benefit and revenue in the $70,000 range. If and when it's developed, it's going to obviously increase there. My reason for this being a topic for us is we're probably going to be investing some significant monies in the purchase of a residential detox facility because we need it. We don't have that capability in the county. And again, this is an asset that we do own. The lease that was negotiated with Cleveland Clinic was done so at arm's length. My guess is, reading it, I suspect they probably prepared most of it, but it does include the option for us to sell it if we choose to do so. So I just would like that to still be something for us to consider and move forward with. And I don't know, I think, Mary Beth, when in December, the conversation, you had, I don't remember the name of the law firm, but a law firm that had been involved with the district at the time of the 2018-19 when the lease was negotiated. I don't want to be the board's lawyer by any stretch, but I can't not be a lawyer when I read legal documents. So that's why I generated the memo, and I just didn't want us to let this fall through the cracks.
When did we become the owners of that land? Was that at the creation back in day one?
It was, historically, they purchased the land, and this is my understanding, that with CONs, if you have property, if a hospital owns property in certain locations, then other hospitals could not come in. And so that property was purchased and left there for that particular reason, so no other hospital could come in with the CON because of the location.
And truthfully, you know, our assessment of that, the viability and use of the property probably should incorporate some long-term planning that we've discussed too in terms of where's our next medical campus going to be. Any rate, like I said, I was concerned with you know, Mike, I think under your breath at one of the meetings, you had commented that you felt like it was off the table. I think that may have been the last meeting we had. And I said, wait a minute, you know, I could see where that misunderstanding may have taken place. Let's readdress it. So that's why I put it on the agenda. That's why I drafted the document that I prepared. And I'd just like for us to continue to take steps to explore that as an option for us.
So Frank and I had a meeting this week with Dale Jacobs and Ellen Kendall. I cannot remember her name, sorry. And they are part of the Coalition for Attainable Housing, I believe it is. And they have established this land trust. And they were asking about that property out there, okay? And asked if we could set up a meeting with Dr. Peter to talk about maybe some potential of taking 20 acres of that property for attainable housing. Is that realistic to do that? Is that is that something we want to look at? We've talked before about, my personal feeling is I would like to see the hospital open an emergency room out there. With the growth that we've got out there, we don't have an emergency room in this county that is west of US 1. And I think that's a problem as growth comes. And so I personally wouldn't be in favor of selling it right now because I do think that there are better, more important things for the community that we should be managing and not just selling it off. I think there's uses there that we ought to be spearheading. I guess that's.
And to your point, I think that begs the question: is the from a planning perspective the best location for the next campus, the next emergency room, what have you, and there's a lot of vacant land right out by I-95, and it's a 1.25 mile differential, but I don't know from a planning perspective if that's the.
Zoning would be, I think there's very specific zoning, and I think that this particular parcel.
It's zoned for mobile homes.
Is it? I
Yeah.
don't know. Is it?
It's RM8, I believe, or 12, 8 or 12, but it's currently zoned for mobile homes.
Couple of comments. One, Paul, you're not wrong. I think that maybe I had not fully understood the nature of that property and what rights we had or didn't have. Secondly, although I'm not a lawyer, every time I try to read a legal document, I just go blind. It was very difficult trying to read through there. And third, I wasn't at the meeting with Dale and Ellen, but I think this is a case where I don't think they're interested in buying land. I think they're very interested in land being donated to them, because I am working with these folks in
No speaking of
yeah,
buying.
no. And lastly, again, I guess the attitude I've had since becoming a trustee, when I started thinking about these kind of things, was that, particularly in light of the development that's happening on Oslo Road now and putting an exchange out there, that it was probably more timely now than it ever has been as the possible location for something. Because we're finally at that point where the growth is reaching, it's starting to have impacts on the existing campus, and now just physically, geographically, it might come into play. But I'll also say I'm not sure there's not other land that could, if you're gonna place something, might be better, but I think that's all part of the 30,000-foot strategic view we need to take and start planning for. So it's timely in that regard. Frank's nodding his head because we're talking about those kind of things now too.
Jennifer, help me out with this, please, as counsel. So it's in the lease, they have first right of refusal, correct? I don't know the difference between what Paul is talking about and so when we say we want to spearhead or, talk about the next medical facility, is that really our format? Is that I mean, we're not the ones, if they've got that land, if that's the first right, it's them. We can suggest to them, but
Well, I
what's our-
meant that in the spirit as partners.
As-
And
As
and let me
partners.
let me clarify what I said and where I was going.
Okay.
First, let me clarify, I was saying that if we're going to commit that hospital, or excuse me, that property for medical use, we would be well advised to take that 30,000-foot look and coordinate with and plan where is the ideal location, and not let the tail wag the dog. If a better location is out at the intersection of I-95 and State Road 60, and the county commission believes so, or for planning purposes, that's the better location as opposed to 1.5 miles south of State Road 60, I think we need to know that. So that was my point in terms of the strategic planning. And the question then begs, are we an organization that only disperses money and we're not thinking strategically, or are we an organization that the taxpayers reasonably expect that we're going to be engaged in strategic planning? I think we're the latter, and that's what I'm advocating for.
Frank, you referenced that every hospital health organization has a facilities plan, and we haven't seen it. I'd be interested to see if they've got to the point where they're projecting 10, 20 years out, if part of that decision from their perspective, Cleveland's perspective, is its location. At this juncture, that land exists, but I'd kind of be interested in seeing what they say would be the best location. So that would play a factor.
I think that would be a good next step for us.
I thought we talked about yesterday that
did.
you're
I
gonna
was
look.
tasked
He's gonna get it.
He's gonna
So
get it,
I reached
yeah.
out to Dr. Peter today, and I'm waiting on a call back, but Yeah, we need to get, I mean, every hospital has a master facilities plan, and they are not going to make an investment in expansion without doing a lot of work on needs analysis and all that. It's going to be very thoughtfully done. So I think a good place to start would be to get that MFP from Cleveland Indian
I
River.
feel better about Cleveland's plan than I would the county commissioner saying we're the best plan is, personally.
Well, they're the ones planning out our growth and development, so
Well,
I think
yeah.
they need to be at the table, probably.
Well, I would hope that they are asking people that provide those kind of services what they do, so.
I may comment, I heard Dr. Peter give a talk Monday night, and there were questions related to just that, the emergency room. So I think sooner is probably better than later visiting and finding out exactly what their plans are, because they're talking, at least.
Well, they're talking about rebuilding the current
Yes,
emergency
yes,
room.
that's my
Right,
point. That's
right.
my point. They're not someplace else. They're talking about
And it needs to be.
And-
taking local land, right.
Yes. So I don't know that that it's off the table. I think that there are uses, and at this point in time, the sale of that property doesn't seem to be even something that I would want to consider until we do understand what the potential is and what their vision is and the whole housing situation. I mean, there's a lot of community impacts that I would hate to get rid of an asset that could have a huge impact to the rest of the.
Well, and remember, you would have to declare it surplus, just like we did with the parcel we're now selling. So there, Paul is correct. The black letter he's provided is what the lease says. And the hospital has, Cleveland Clinic has rights of first refusal on many parcels, multiple parcels. We've encountered several of these already. This is also one of them, parcel C, the land out west. And so, if you decided to sell it, that's one thing. And if you had a buyer, you'd have to give them the opportunity to match it and be the buyer instead, or waive their right of first refusal. And then, if that happened, you'd have to go through the motions that we went through with regard to the hospice house parcel and declare it surplus. So from what I'm hearing, I'm not sure that you would be able to do that. That would be a sticking point that the board would have to overcome in this process if you went forward with this.
I'm not hearing a huge, I mean, a huge interest in selling it from.
No,
Well, I hear you all loud and clear, and the point was brought up as a product of our December 20 meeting. I'll read from the minutes. Mr. Westcott stated that he would also like to further explore the district options within the lease with CCIRH to sell the parcel on 82nd Avenue, and made a motion to approve same. Ms. Cunningham second, and the motion passed unanimously. So that's why I brought it up.
and we appreciate that. Yep.
There's
On
nothing
the,
wrong with that. It's perfectly fine, and on my end, I would have taken any further steps, but no one had brought it up to this point, so I think that's.
I think we have a good conversation and we kind of know what we're
Well,
doing.
we've already, some of this is in the works. We're talking about it. You're getting a document that's going to give us some additional information that'll be
Right.
very helpful or
Right.
spawn other questions. So, I mean, we're kind of on the path.
Right.
A lot of work to do and a ways to go.
Carrie, you had a comment?
on the agenda, it says action required. That was a concern to me, that new business was coming up for action required. So was that your intent, was to have some action?
Well, I was going to have a conversation, which we've done, and then if there was going to, if we were going to move forward, it would be consulting with appropriate counsel in terms of moving in that direction. It would probably involve an appraisal, so we could put it, in addition to the analysis that I've talked about, which is, which would go to Jennifer Peschke's point, which is it surplus or not? And that question, I think, in part gets answered, or largely gets answered, by the planning considerations and where an appropriate campus, next campus should be, and where our next medical community is going to be. Whether it's going to be a mile and a
So
half
there is
south
no
of 60.
action required tonight. That's
Not
my
at this
point.
point. I mean, I could make a motion that we have Jennifer draft a resolution, and I know it would fail, so I'm not going to do that.
Well, you should hear, and I think you are hearing, though, that, A, was a very legitimate point of discussion. And it fits right in now with some of the other things that we're dealing with. So we're on a path there.
Absolutely.
And
I'm encouraged by the discussions that toward, planning and, looking for, the whats, wheres, and whens, I guess. So.
Okay, any other business? Any public comment? Yes, Don?
Sorry, as public, not as a district employee, but as a resident on 82nd Avenue, I will say, I'm also an HOA president, so I'm gonna kind of speak on behalf of a lot of the residents. There's just under 5,000 55 and up modular home or manufactured home parks. They don't call them mobile anymore, but there's a lot of residents out there, and they are over 55. It's definitely an aging population that I see in the meetings that I'm attending out that way. And that is one of the biggest complaints, is that there are no medical facilities. Point West is the only walk-in center that's even close, and it's a good 20 to 25-minute ride to get to the hospital if you live out west. So I just figured I would make
Good
that
input.
for a comment to the board.
But 55 and older is not that old, Dawn.
No, I agree. I
Just
agree.
clarify
But a
that
lot of the
point.
folks have lived there for a long time, so they're aging.
No, I appreciate that comment, and you're right. When you look at the growth out there, it needs to be there. Now, TCCH will be out there in the Clifton building.
Exactly.
But that'll take a little while to get going, so. Okay, any other public comment? If not, we are adjourned. Thank you all.
thank you.